Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, and it's a very interesting text. He was alive during times of war, as many humans are, and so he's talking about not all rights are alienable. So we're going to continue upon that thread. Let's begin. Bismillah. Whosoever a man transferreth his right, or renounce it, it is either in consideration of some right reciprocally transferred to himself, or from some other good he hope for thereby. So, one note is that the way this is spelled is a different time period of English. So, renounceth or renounce. So I might go back and forth, whatever is smoother in the configurations of my mind. But I do like that it's how they spoke and wrote at that time. For it is voluntary act, and of the voluntary act of every man the object is some good to be himself. And therefore there be some rights which no man can be understood by any words or other signs, to have abandoned or transferred. As first, a man cannot lay down the right of resisting them, that assault him by force, to take away his life, because he cannot be understood to aim thereby at any good to himself. The same may be said. So, like, for example, said is not spelled S-A-I-D, it's spelled S-A-Y-D, of wounds, and chains, and imprisonment, both because there is no benefit consequent to such patients, as there is to the patients of suffering, another to be wounded or imprisoned. So that's an interesting element here, is just looking at the different times when patience is beneficial and versus when it's not. As also because a man cannot tell, when he seeth men proceed against him by violence, whether they intend his death or not. That's true. You don't exactly know what they're gonna do. They're coming at you sideways. Are they gonna finish the job, or are they gonna let you live? Whether they intend his death or not, and lastly the motive, and the end for which this renouncing and transferring of right is introduced, is nothing else but the security of a man's person in his life, and in the means of so preserving life, as not to be weary of it. And therefore, if a man by words or other signs seem to deploy himself of the end, which those signs were intended, he was not to be understood as if he meant it, or that it was his will, but that he was ignorant of how such words and actions were to be interpreted. So, transferring your rights, when you renounce your rights, and that there's different kinds of patience. You don't know when someone's coming at you in a violent manner, what they intend or not. So it appears to be the renunciation of your rights depends upon what's happening to you to make you do that in the first place. The mutual transferring of right is that which men call contract. There is a difference between transferring of right to the thing and transferring or tradition, that is, delivery of the thing itself. For the thing may be delivered together with a translation of the right, so contract, as in buying and selling with ready money, or exchange of goods or lands, and it may be delivered sometime after. Okay, so you have a right over this land, but when you write a contract, you've sold it, someone's bought it, now that right to the land is passed on. Again, one of the contractors may deliver the thing contracted for on his part, and leave the other to perform his part at some determinate time after, and in the meantime be trusted. And then the contract on his part is called pact, or covenant, or both parts may contract now to perform hereafter, in which cases he that is to perform in time to come being trusted, his performance is called keeping a promise, or faith, and failing of performance, if it be voluntary, violation of faith. That's a really cool one right there. I don't think we realize that a lot in our modern times. just how important it is to. So you have a contract, and the one who has to deliver the end it's a covenant, it's a pact, and you have to keep your promise. And if you don't do that, well, now you've done a violation of the faith that that person put in you. Interesting legalized language here. It's quite remarkable when you think of it in terms of a spiritual sense. When the transferring of right is not mutual, but one of the parties transfers in hope to gain thereby friendship or service from another, or from his friends, or in hope to gain the reputation of charity, or magnanimity, or to deliver his mind from the pain of compassion, or in hope of reward in heaven. This is not contract, but gift, free gift, grace, which would signify one and the same thing. Ah, well, that's cool. So it appears to be that a contract is buying, selling, exchange of goods, land. Okay, that in the contractors, the one who has to deliver the thing contracted on his part, he has a pact, a covenant. If you don't keep that, it's not keeping a promise. He's not keeping the faith, and then he's in violation of the faith. But then he points out here, when you transfer a right, it's not mutual, but they've transferred their rights in hope to gain something by friendship or service or reputation. So, I want to have a reputation of charity. I want to have a reputation of magnanimity. Or just to have some mind relief, or to have a reward from your maker. That's actually called a gift. It's a free gift, so it's grace. It's not a same type of contracted covenant. That's pretty cool. You never know what you're gonna read with Hobbes because he's very wordy, but we're getting educated here. Signs of contract are either express or by inference. Oh my goodness, that's so true. Is it explicit as stated? Is it expressed or is it inferred? Expressed are words spoken with understanding of what they signify. And such words are either of the time present or past, as I give, I grant, I have given, I have granted, I will this be yours, or the future as I will give, I will grant, which words of the future are called promise. Okay, perfect. So here we see the importance of knowing how to understand the legalized framework. Sometimes this is educational because if you think of like how kids that have like Rumpelstiltskin, you'll see that type of mythos where someone knows how to create a riddled contract through rhetoric, and then you don't really understand what has happened. And this is like the thing lawyers quibble about. So when we see him lay it out as here as when you sign a contract, it's expressive or it's inferred. And when it's expressed, the language is clearly understood as what it signifies. And there will be a present tense or a past tense there. Signs by inference are sometimes the consequence of words, sometimes the consequence of silence, sometimes the consequence of action, sometimes the consequence of forbearing an action, and generally a sign by inference of any contract is whatsoever sufficiently argues the wills of the contract. Words alone, if they be of the time come and contain a bare promise, are an insufficient sign of a free gift, and therefore not obligatory. For if they be of the time to come, as tomorrow I will give, they are a sign I have not given yet, Consequently, that my right is not transferred, but remaineth till I transfer it by some other act. But if the words be of time present or past, as I have given or do give to be delivered tomorrow, then my tomorrow's right given away today. And that by the virtue of the words, though there were no other argument of my will. And there is a great difference in the signification of these words, volo hoc tum esse cras, and cras dabo, that is, between I will that this be thine tomorrow, and I will give it thee tomorrow. This is fascinating because it almost sounds, okay, so I will that this be thine tomorrow, so I will that this be yours tomorrow, and I will give it thee tomorrow. I will that this be yours tomorrow, I will that this be thine tomorrow, I will give it to thee tomorrow. It's almost like a lesson in, semantics in a strange way. This is why philosophers have fun. And I will give it thee tomorrow, for the word I will, in the former manner of speech, signifies an act of the will present. Oh! For the word I will, in the former manner of speech, signifies an act of the will present. The will that is present. We as Muslims say, Inshallah, if Allah wills, because nothing is guaranteed for us, so we always have that caveat. Interesting. But in the later, it signifies a promise of an act of the will to come. And so the act of the will to come versus the will that is present. And therefore, the former words, being of the present, transfer a future right. The latter, that be of the future, transfer nothing. But if there be other signs of the will to transfer a right, besides words, then, though the gift be free, yet may be the right be understood to pass by words of the future, as if a man propound a prize to him that comes first to the end of a race. The gift is free, and though the words be of the future, yet the right passeth. For if he would not have his words so be understood, he should not have left them run. What you get here thus far is the expressive nature of contracts, and to really watch what you say. And that signs of your contract, they come by inference. So when you're finagling in court, you gotta know this kind of stuff. In contracts, the right passeth not only where the words are of the time present or past, but also where they are of the future. Because all contract is mutual translation. All contract is mutual translation or change of right. And therefore he that promised only, because he hath already received the benefit for which he promised, is to be understood as if he intended the right should pass. For unless he had been content to have his words so understood, the other would not have performed his part first. And for that cause, in buying and selling, and other acts of contract, a promise is equivalent to a covenant, and therefore obligatory. So that's interesting. So, interesting language here. How your words will be understood. Acts of a contract, a promise is equivalent to a covenant. And if you've made a covenant, it is therefore obligatory. When you need to deliver a thing that's contracted, you're being trusted to do that, and so it's a pact, it's a covenant. If you fail to do what you were trusted to do in your performance, you fail to keep your promise, you fail to keep the faith, and now you are in violation of faith. You're in violation of contract. Ooh, I hope I never have to mess around with none of these legals. Often my grandpa would tell me that I like to have the last word and that I should be a lawyer. But a lot of philosophers go into law. He that performeth the first in the case of a contract is said to merit that which he is to receive by the performance of the other. Okay, so we have merit. So who performed first? So who performed first? Merit. And he hath it as due. Who has it due? That's a good way to list. So you performed it first. You did it out of merit. It has its due. And also when a prize is propounded to many, which is to be given to him only that winneth, or money is thrown amongst many, to be enjoyed by them that catch it. Though this be a free gift, yet so to win, or so to catch, is to merit, and to have it as a due. So you win the race, you were promised a prize, you won it, you done the merit, and now you'll have your due. For the right is transferred in the propounding of the prize, and in throwing down the money, though it be not determined to whom, but by the event of the contention. But there is between these two sorts of merit this difference, in that contract I merit by virtue of my own power, and the contractor's need. So I merit by my own power and the contractor's need. So contractors need. But in this case of free gift, I am able to merit only by the benignity of the giver. In contract, I merit at the contractor's hand that he should depart with his right. In this case of gift, I merit not that the giver should part with his right, but that when he has parted with it, it should be mine, rather than another's. So you won it, you earned the merit. Reminds me of the phrase meritocracy. And this, I think, be the meaning of that distinction of the schools between meritum congrui and meritum condigni. For God Almighty have promised paradise to those men hoodwinked with carnal desires that can walk through this world according to the precepts and limits prescribed by him. They say he that shall so walk shall merit paradise ex congruo. But because no man can demand a right to it by his own righteousness or any other power in himself, but by the free grace of God only, they say no man can merit paradise ex condigno. This I say, I think, is the meaning of that distinction. So, what you deserve based off of your worth is meritum condigni, and then meritum congrui is merit of fitness. Fascinating. The merit you got from being fit versus merit based off of your worth. I love philosophy, man. This is an interesting one here, because this gets into the theology of good works getting you into paradise, and then you're right as a believer to be led into paradise because you were a believer even though you were a sinner. But I think for us Muslims, the way we would look at it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the final say. So you need to do good deeds, and your good deeds will be measured. And some of you will excel more than others, but you'll never have an injustice. But hellfire is earned, and paradise is earned, and we know some people will be let out of the fire. Okay? And we have lots of hadith about if you die associating nothing with Allah, you have the option of paradise. If you die on the birthing bed, if you die in jihad, right? So martyrs, where do they go? We have a lot of things that get you into paradise. So our worth, meritum condigni, and then fitness. Very fascinating to examine. Wow. But because no man can demand a right to it by his own righteousness or any other power in himself, but by the free grace of God only. So you can't command God because you don't have the power in yourself. Only the grace of God gets you into paradise. Disputers do not agree upon the signification of their own terms of art, longer than it serves their turn. It will not affirm anything of their meaning. Only this I say, when a gift is given indefinitely as a prize to be contended for, he that winneth meriteth, and may claim the prize is due. Okay, so a prize is a gift, and if you earn that gift through your merits, then it's due. If a covenant be made, wherein neither of the parties perform presently, but trust one another in the condition of mere nature, which is a condition of war of every man against every man, upon any reasonable suspicion, it is void. See the way they spelled void? Instead of V-O-I-D, it's V-O-Y-D, so it's important to be able to read it and then translate it into your head instantaneously. It's fascinating. But if there be a common power set over them, both with right and force sufficient to compel performance, it is not void. So here what do we see? If two people made a covenant, right? And none of them have performed it, but they trust each other because of mere nature. They don't have any suspicion. It can kind of get voided very easily because you're in a state of war against every man. But when you have a common power, so the state, your religion, a law, someone who can set things straight, they're going to compel you to perform your oaths. So we know as Muslims we're supposed to keep our oaths. We're told that. Fulfill your oaths. It is not void, for he that performeth first has no assurance the other will perform after, because the bonds of words are too weak to bridle men's ambition. Oh my goodness, that's a good one. So whoever goes first, you're not sure if that person is gonna actually do it. Words are too weak to bridle men's ambitions, and a bridle is a object that you put on a horse, brings them back a bit. So the bit goes in the horse's mouth, and the bridle's that thing that goes on their face. So when you pull those reins, you pull back the bridle, and they stop. When the horse is not listening, and his bridle's installed properly, and you pull on it, well, that can stop him. But here we see that words alone are not a sufficient bridle. a bridle to men's ambition, avarice, anger, and other passions, without the fear of some coercive power. Oh, you see? So he's pointing out that humans do need a coercive power. Okay? So, coercive. So it's funny when an atheist is like, yeah, man, we can just, smoke pot, bro, and eat psychedelic mushrooms, and everyone will just love each other, and we don't need weapons, man. It's like, you're an idiot. You have no clue what you're talking about. Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell were like, we can just give mushrooms to everybody and force feed them mushrooms, and we can make an AI robot to put mushrooms in everyone. Just complete utter morons. That humans have ambitions, avarice, and anger, and other passions. So they do need a higher power, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'd argue, and His laws on earth to help keep people in check. Which, in the condition of mere nature, where all men are equal, and judges or of the justness of their own fears, cannot possibly be supposed. So when everyone's judging their own selves, you're in a state of nature, there's no higher authority, well, you're not going to be able to bridle people's vices. And therefore, he which performeth first does not betray himself to his enemy, contrary to the right he can never abandon of defending his life and means of living. So, the coercive power angle I really find compelling. But in a civil estate, where there is a power setup to constrain those that would otherwise violate their faith, that fear is no more reasonable, and for that cause he which by the covenant is to perform first is obliged so to do. The cause of fear which maketh such a covenant invalid must be always something arising after the covenant made, as something new, fact or other sign of the will not to perform, else it can not make the covenant void. For that which could not hinder a man from promising ought not to be admitted as hindrance of performing. Oh, you see that? So, for that which could not hinder you from promising ought not to be used as a hindrance of performing what you promised. Very interesting. He which by the covenant is performed first is obliged so to do. Always something otherwise to do. He that transfereth any right transfers the means of enjoying it as far as layeth in his power, as he that selleth land is understood to transfer the herbage. I like that phrasing. So, selleth me the land, I have transferreth the herbage, and whatever grows upon it. Nor can he that sells a mill turn away the stream that drives it. Ooh, see, so you're really getting into like, oh, you bought the mill, oh, I'm going to deviate the stream now. Can't do that. And they that give to a man the right of government in sovereignty are understood to give him the right of levying money to maintain soldiers and of appointing magistrates for the administration of justice. Okay, so we see here the role of the sovereign. So, rights of the sovereign. So, when you have a sovereign government, you've allowed them to say, hey man, you need to levy the money to get the soldiers to be maintained, and you need to carry out administrative justice. This all looks like what is being transferred. So the right to the end contains the right to the means. The right to the end contains the right to the means. Think about that. So the land is your right. So everything on it now becomes yours. It's not, oh, I gave you the land, now I'm going to just sow it with salt, so you can't grow something, or we got to remove the trees. Oh, I sold you the apple orchard, but I sold you the physical land, not the trees already on it. You see? And then they just come in and take it all, and you're like, no, I bought that. It's mine. You no longer get to tell me what can grow on it. It's mine. You buy a mill, there's a stream there that's already working on it. They don't have a right to take off the stream because you didn't say, oh, you have to not do that. To make covenants with brute beasts is impossible, because not understanding our speech, they understand not nor accept of any translation of right, nor can translate any right to another, and without mutual exception there is no covenant. Without mutual exception there is no covenant. So brute beasts, people who they're gonna toss away that contract, you can't really trust them, can you? So here we see how in Islam, when we give, I think the Arabic word is bay'ah. Like, you make a bay'ah to the Amir al-Mu'mineen. You make a pledge to the leader, right? We have to hold that. So we have, when we submit in Islam and we join our faith, we've made a covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you think about this language here. It's interesting. Let's see what he says, though. Brute beasts. To make covenant with God is impossible, but by mediation of such a God speaketh to, either by revelation supernatural, or by his lieutenants that govern under him and in his name, for otherwise we know not whether our covenants be accepted or not. Okay, so that's interesting that I just kind of thought about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, to make a covenant with God, he contends is impossible, but you have to have the mediation of like who God speaks through. So Catholics make a pledge to what they call the Vicar of Christ, the Pope, and but if I recall, that God made a covenant with the tribe of Israel, according to the Bible. And when Christians contend that God made a covenant with Noah, or after Noah, after the flood, that he would never flood the earth again. But otherwise we know not whether our covenant be accepted or not. So if you don't have a mediator, he could not as someone you pray to. I think he's saying like the prophets and the messengers are mediators, and then they're like the person who you would talk to about the covenant. I'm not sure. And therefore they that vow anything contrary to any law of nature vow in vain, as being a thing unjust to pay such vow. And if it be a thing commanded by the law of nature, it is not the vow, but the law that binds them. The matter or subject of a covenant is always something that falls under deliberation. For to covenant is an act of the will, that is to say, an act and the last act of deliberation. Okay, so the last act of deliberation is the covenant. A covenant is an act of your will. I will enter into this covenant, and so you're exercising your will there. and it is therefore always understood to be something to come, and which is judged possible for him that covenanteth to perform. Okay, so if you make this covenant, then you've made a judgment call that is possible you actually perform it. So this hints at something being realistic. And therefore, to promise that which is known to be impossible is no covenant. So this sounds like if you put some high demands on people, like to deliver something that they promise, but it's not feasible, then it can't be a covenant then. But if that prove impossible afterwards, which before was thought possible, the covenant is valid and bindeth, though not to this thing itself, yet to the value of it that also be impossible, to the unfined endeavor of performing as much as is possible. For to more no man can be obliged. Okay, so you made a promise. I have a covenant with you. We're gonna figure this out. We thought it was plausible. Turns out it didn't really work, but the covenant is still valid, and you're bound to that. So you can see that, okay, the thing itself that you were supposed to do didn't happen, but there's a value there. So it looks like you're obliged to kind of rectify it. You didn't deliver. You didn't deliver on your promise. You overestimated. Very cool. So, covenant with Bruce Beasts. Don't do it. It's impossible. Someone has to have manners and really respect what their contracts mean. So this hints that if you want someone to enter into a contract with you, you need to... If you borrow money, that's a contract. You have to be able to pay that money back. This makes me think of the credit scores that we use in banking. I think... Because look at it this way. People will say it's a risk to lend money to you, so we charge interest. Because if you don't pay back, you're going to get penalized. It's an incentive to push you, but it will enslave you if you don't pay. For us Muslims, we say don't do debt, but we have the culture of high trust that, hey, you need to fulfill your oaths and you shouldn't die upon debt. You need to pay back what you owe. And don't say what you do not do. If you don't have actions are judged by intentions. And if you made a covenant and your intention was to never fulfill it, Allah sees what's within the chest, you're going to be in trouble. So I find this interesting because if we are civilized people, then people will want to make contracts with us. And people will trust that when a covenant is made, that we will not break the faith and that we will hold to it. I mean, that's awesome. This is a very interesting thing because you need to have some faith that the other person is going to do it. Okay. And then the coolest things in Latin: meritum congrui, merit of fitness, and then meritum condigni, what you deserve based off of your worth. And so, what you do? Okay, what's a covenant? And then we learned the language of a signs of contracts as either expressive or by inference. And so, when it's expressive, when the words are spoken, you know already what they signify. There's no doubt in the matter. So, they're restricted to their time, through time being past or present. Language like I grant, I have given, I give, I will give. And so those hint at a promise. When you made a promise, you need to keep it. Okay, I hope you learned something. Hobbes is heavy, no doubt about it. But it's good for you nonetheless because it really makes us see how we all have to focus on what we do and to strive to be the best we can. Okay? If you'd like to support my work, you can do so by going to www.subscribestar.com/Milahan Archive. Hope to see you there.